As we look at how to transition identity, how do we move from one pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being to a new pattern, to another pattern? The first analogy that is useful is that of changing gear in a manual transmission. So, in order to change gear from first to second or second to third, which is changing the pattern, going from a smaller pattern to a larger pattern to a larger pattern, and thus changing the ratio of torque to speed in the car, is you need a clutch, right? And so you need the variable of a clutch, because in order to make a smooth transition, you need to have low pressure. Now, that brings me to another point. There's actually two ways to change identity. One is voluntarily, and that tends to happen with a clutch and at a good pivot point. The other is under duress, under extreme pressure. And these are identity shifts out of trauma, where a smaller mass, your identity, is colliding with a larger mass. So we can think of a body colliding with a train, for example, right? The body is thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being something. It's hit by a train, and then the thought, the feeling, the speaking, the doing, and being is shattered. And a new identity may emerge, either fertilizer for plants, etc., as in the case of a death, and a composted body, or ash and smoke, as in the case of cremation, or a new identity. Now I'm a cripple. Now I'm a train wreck, right? Now I'm someone recovering from an injury. Now I'm someone in shock, right? So it's a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. But with a clutch, you take off the pressure during the transition. You make a transition and you re-engage. So that's the process of a smooth identity transition. And so in order to reach that point, you've got to, you can think of it as kind of having your feet on the ground. You have to jump off the ground, and when you have freedom to move your feet, you change the position, and then you can come back down on the ground, right? But once your feet are both planted on the ground with weight on them, you can't change them easily. So you've got to create a cessation of forces on the current identity, allow the change, and then gradually increase the pressure on the new identity. So, let's look at what those clutches can be. So one, for example, is you might earn a lot of money, come up to a peak where you have, let's say, 6 months of savings. Then you might pivot right up in here and then move into the new identity, going down into a new state of pressure, right? And reinforcement. And if you wanted to change identity again from a financial perspective, you'd, come up again to some point of ease, to some point where, if you're going to change jobs, or if you're going to go look for a job, or quit your job, or move house, for example, it helps if you have liquidity or a lack of pressure, a lack of financial urgent pressure on you. Now, another phenomena is, let's say you are gay and you want to come out around being gay. But, you're at church, you're a choir boy, you're this, you're that. Everyone around you doesn't want to hear that you're gay. You've got external pressure. You've got internal pressure out of your empathy for those around you. Those around you have pressure from the illusions of God, right? Who knew that God would be homophobic? But that's the idea, right? So the idea is that God's pressuring me, the people around me are pressuring. Got all this pressure. So it's very hard to go from being, a divine heterosexual to, one of those in that pressure, right? So how do you pivot into being known as one thing to known as another? Well, one thing you can do to depressurize is you can just go to another town or another country, right? So you go from your pressurized environment to your unpressurized environment. And in that situation, maybe you pick a place where there's no pressure. How about a popular hub for homosexuality, for example? Or a country where, male-male affection is normal and men kiss on the cheek and play and flirt and all that. So you go to a place where there is low pressure. And in that low pressure environment, you develop a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that is ideally supported by your environment, by the projections, ideas, fears, etc. of those around you, as well as what's inside, and perhaps a different mythology, right? Buddha, so far as we can tell, didn't seem to be anti-homosexuals, right? So maybe you go to a Buddhist culture, which is about acceptance and the middle way, etc. So out of a Christian culture of judgmental and into a Buddhist culture of acceptance and balance and humility and compassion and etc. So you move to a different environment. And you develop the identity before returning to the other environment. And distance definitely helps because identity is definitely influenced by energy, by mass. And if you have a new fledgling identity, it's psychologically, statistically probable that family, friends, and acquaintances will reinforce and reward you for being who you were and punish you for changing into just about anything, for the simple reason that it is more expedient, right? If everyone would just stay the same and we didn't have to update our data set and change and learn new ways of interacting with them, we could just do what we've always done very efficiently. We can rely on people to stay in their line, in their role, do what they're supposed to do, which is basically whatever they've always done before, and we're all happy, right? You're the loser, you're the fitness person, you're the perfectionist, and just do what you've always done before. And then I don't have to be surprised or feel out of control or learn anything new or develop new relating skills or gather new data. I don't have to spend any energy at all. You are the person that I imagined you to be, and you always will be that. But if you start to change, well, that's upsetting. Now I feel less in control. I'm more surprised. I have to make an effort. So there's definitely a drive in any group to keep its group members the same and not to facilitate that evolution. So if you develop a fragile identity, you can kind of think of it as a caterpillar beginning to turn into a butterfly. Well, it's very easy to step on that, right, until the butterfly takes wing. If you think of an oak tree as going from a seed and germinating into a tree, well, when the tree is 1 inch tall, you can just stamp it out, right? And so if you've got a herd of relatives that are waiting in the wings to punish dissent and stamp out change, or if you're in a country that's fanatical about this or that or the other, right? And you're trying to grow and explore who you are. Well, it'll be ground out of you if it possibly can be in many cases. And so usually you develop the new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, and return when it is an established pattern and you have other sources of support, meaning we all have human needs. The third need is love and belonging. And so love and belonging for the new identity is survival food. If you expose that new identity to hostility with zero sources of love and belonging, it's very difficult to make that pivot. So the movement towards another place for, and then returning. So we're talking about depressurizing and de-energizing the old pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, and then developing, letting it blossom in an optimal soil environment like a greenhouse, and then exporting, taking that out again into the world. So let's look at all the different ways you can depressurize. So, one is take financial pressure off of the existing identity. That's why financial freedom is, such a valuable part of growth. Another is to go to a place where nobody knows you, because then all their projections and needs for you to maintain the same, that pressure is removed for you. Another is to go to a place where the new identity that you want to develop is normal and supported, so that there's actually a group helping to hold that identity. Now, that will not be the case if it's truly original, truly unique, truly new, right? Because there's no one like that, so there's no one holding that. But for example, if you want to go from being a Christian to a Buddhist, or a Buddhist to be a Christian, well, there's plenty of stereotypes about that. And so if you pick up from a Buddhist country and go to a Christian country and then try to become a Christian, well, it'll be somewhat easier, right? Because other people will have their ideas, and you can ask questions like, what do I do? What do I say? What do I think? And they say, oh, Christians do this. And then you say, well, why aren't you doing that if you're a Christian? And they say, well, we're hypocrites, right? We believe in these texts, we just don't do them, but we tell everyone else that that's, the Christian way. And so it's like, oh, I see, right? So there's a movement towards, a group that is supportive of that new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Another thing is, taking off responsibilities. I have to get my child every day at 4 o'clock. So going into a new environment where you have no responsibilities. I have to think this, do this, whatever. So that's an important part of depressurizing identity. Breaking the daily routine. The routine is a big part of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. I get up, I drink this, I eat this, I say this, I do this. So you break the routine. So I look at different books. I look at different media. I change the routine. I change the environment. I travel. I put myself in a new environment. I depressurize. I disconnect. I dissociate from the old environment. And here we're talking about a pretty profound identity shift, or at least an exploration out of which you can evaluate, right? I went to the Philippines. I went out sailing on a couple of small sailboats. I think they're called little catamarans. It was very fun, very easy. And I thought, well, why don't I bring this back, to my house in San Francisco? I came back, I bought a small sailboat, and I went out and, did some sailing. So you can take pieces of an outer experience and bring it back. So you have travel, you have meeting new people and exposing yourself to new experiences. You also have inner travel, meditative and psychedelic. Things such as LSD and psilocybin reduce blood flow to the default mode network. That's the identity. That's the default pattern of thinking out of which we feel, out of which we speak, out of which we do, and which defines a lot of our way of being. So we interrupt the default mode network, which is the habitual identity. And in that space, we see ourselves in a new way. We can perceive ourselves in a new light, and we can decide how much of that to take back as the foundation for a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. So, to summarize, we have an existing pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we identify, we have as the I. And why change it at all? Well, first of all, there's always a more intelligent identity. There's always a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that yields higher levels of sustainable well-being and consumes less energy, right, in the process. So it's more graceful. So there's always a more intelligent form of well-being. And the intelligent form of well-being reduces suffering, right? And that's the innate human drive. The innate human drive is to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. There's only one way to do that, and that is to change our identity, either by putting our existing identity in a different ecology, in a different culture or environment where it's easier to be us, or by changing the identity so that it's easier to be someone else in the current environment, or both, right? So that's why we change identity. And so what's pressurizing these identity are legal restrictions, other people's expectations, feelings of guilt and obligation, fear of the unknown, unconscious habits, wanting to belong with a group that does things a certain way, meeting our needs for love and belonging, needing to do these things in order to make money and survive and feel secure, other people being upset if we change, perhaps a self-image of ourselves, like this is who we are, right? So the I that's attached to things. Not knowing what else is out there, and past momentum from past choices, like I bought this house, that's my current identity. Well, I can't just click my fingers and the house vanish, right? I have to put the house on the market, prepare, right? I have to do all these things to offset the momentum of my current or past identity. Then we need to remove step by step and collapse. Now we also have judgments. Judgments strengthen our identity. You're bad, you're good for this, you're bad for that. That's a good feeling, that's a bad feeling. I don't want to be a bad person. This is what good people do, right? So you have judgments, you have beliefs. These are all things that strengthen the identity. And so we have to depressurize, take the money obligations, the legal obligations, the hassles, the momentum. We have to depressurize so that the old identity can collapse. and we can move into a new environment is ideally the situation. We move into a new environment, and we start developing and exploring patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Exploring until we find like, oh, I like thinking that thought, I like that belief, I like hanging out with those people, I like drinking this new drink, I like doing this. It's a new pattern, has a different probability field. I'm happier in this new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, and I'm now in this new environment that's supporting that. And so I'm going to develop that identity. I'm going to develop beliefs. I'm going to fit in with, new legal structures. I'm going to have financial support. I'm going to find friends that, that like that. I'm going to find people that expect this of me, and I'm going to get familiar with it. So it's now known. It's going to become a new part of my self-image. I'm going to have goals, around it, and other people that I can meet my needs with in this context. So now I have this new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that I really like. And now that it's developed, I can evaluate my context and decide, do I want to go back into this culture over here, this environment? Do I want to stay here? What brings out the me that I like? And so this is identity evolution, right? This is the way that the collapse of one identity can rise in intelligence, right? Because in a traumatic event, it often goes both ways, but more often than not, it collapses, right? The old identity is crushed, and I'm in shock, and I'm in PTSD, and then I regress. I go back to my childhood memories of who I was when I was 5 years old and afraid of the world and this and that. And so it's not an evolutionary, it's a regression to strong body memories of an earlier age. So that is the mechanism and the basis to move from one identity to another.